everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. I'm Terry, your host, coming to you from Franklin, Kentucky. I-65 exit 2. I'm here at the, what is this? Where's the sign? What is this place? I think it's the Flying J. There was some parking here. There's a lot of reserve parking still open, but it's, let me see, it's 6:12 local time. But right across the street, there's a marathon, like a Burger King in it. It looked like there was parking back there. Anyway, so today I wanted to talk about a couple of things. One is Forward Air. I've been looking at that company, not for a job, mind you, just looking at it. And something came across the Tim Travels news desk today, and I was like, wow, that's kind of weird. So, as you may know, Forward Air entered into a merger with this company called Omni Logistics. And the Omni Logistics deal was roundly criticized by many stockholders. In fact, they forced the previous CEO out over it. And there was a lawsuit in, I believe in Tennessee State Court, because I think Forward Air is maybe based out of Nashville. But there was a lawsuit over the merger, and I think part of the problem is that Omni Logistics is, or was, heavily debt laden, and all that debt's coming onto the books of Forward Air. So, needless to say, I was a little bit surprised when the new CEO, whose name is Sean Stewart, he just took the job back in April. The new CEO hires this guy named Jamie Pearson to be the interim CFO. Now, you probably don't know the name Jamie Pearson, but this guy was not once, but twice the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of Yellow Trucking. And in fact, he was the CEO at the time that Yellow got a $700 million COVID relief loan from the federal government, or more correctly, the U.S. taxpayers, that Yellow was not entitled to. Okay? Now, as you all know, Yellow's in bankruptcy, and the taxpayers might get their money back with the sale of Yellow's assets, and really it's not the trucks and trailers, because they had shit gear, assets there, but it's probably the terminals, the land and stuff like that. I said back a while ago that I thought that Prime should buy Yellow's terminal in Fontana, California, because it looked like it was pretty new and in pretty good shape, and it would have been a great place for a SoCal terminal. But anyway, so this Jamie Pearson guy, is not really going to be the CFO yet, but he's just on a consulting contract that pays him $78,000 a month. Yeah, that's right, a month, plus $10,000 a month in expenses that he doesn't have to justify. And then if he doesn't get to be, he's got some other incentives, and if he doesn't get chosen as the CFO, this is how you win when you lose, and this is how rich people get richer, even though they helped run another huge old company into the ground. If he doesn't get hired as CFO, and why would you, but whatever, if he doesn't get hired as CFO of Forward Air, he will get a $250,000 thanks for playing fee, in addition to his $78,000 a month plus $10,000 a month in expenses. And let me tell you this. I used to have jobs. I worked for a hedge fund one time, and money seemed to grow on trees, sort of. And no one ever questioned my expenses. If I was like, hey, I need to go to New York, I'd book a first class ticket. I'd have a hotel reservation in Manhattan for 3 nights, all the food, high-end restaurants, meet with people, go to, meet with regulators, whatever. Nobody questioned it. I just put it on my Amex, and when I got back, they cut me a check for everything I spent. Nobody questioned it. And I still can't ever recall spending $10,000 in a month. Now, I know with inflation, that's been a while. That was back in the early to mid 2000s. But anyway, I digress. So here's the thing with Forward Air, and this is, normally I don't care if some guy that has a crappy track record goes to work for another company that's getting beat up by their investors and by the market. But here's something that I thought was really interesting, and if you're a driver at Forward Air, this should interest you. So in their first quarter call with analysts, because Forward Air is a publicly traded company, they indicated that they had 5.5 times leverage to adjusted EBITDA. And EBITDA is EBITDA, and that stands for earnings before interest, taxes, before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's an accountant kind of term. But anyway, they're at 5.5 times leverage on that earnings amount. So even after they excluded charges for this merger, which caused them like an $89 million loss in the quarter, they were still in the hole like $24 million. Okay. Now here's the interesting thing about this Q2, quarter 2 that we're in right now. Apparently, because they have a credit facility with somebody and they borrowed money to do this merger, if for some reason their debt to adjusted EBITDA, it hits 6x, so they're at 5.5 in Q1. If it hits 6x, that's a breach of their covenants and their loan contract, the promissory note. So I don't know what that exactly would trigger, but it would be bad news. I don't know what their cargo is looking like, how much work their drivers have. I think most everybody there, maybe everybody there, is an independent contractor. But if you work there or you know somebody that works there, they really should be, paying close attention to what's going on. And the beauty of these guys is that they're a publicly traded company. So there's a system called, I think Edgar's still around. And Edgar, EDGAR, is the federal system. It's administered by the Securities and Exchange Commission. You can set up an alert on Edgar. You have to create an account, but it's all free because it's all the government. It's like an Obama phone for people that are interested in publicly traded companies, I guess. But anyway, if you go on Edgar, you can set up alerts. So when anything is filed on by a company, you can get a notification and you can go in there and see it. Now, quarterly filings are what are called 10Qs. 10Ks are the annual report, but there's also 8Ks, which are like material situations, and also you might be able to get like insider stock sales, stuff like that. Although usually, because you can even get that on like marketwatch.com or Yahoo Finance or whatever. So anyway, if you're involved with Forward Air in any way, shape, or form, you should keep an eye on them. Okay, so I'm going to answer a quick I'm going to answer a question. I don't know how quick it'll be. So somebody asked me, and I guess folks, I keep gaining subscribers. I think we're getting close to 3,500 subscribers. So somebody asked, you used to be a lawyer, why are you driving a truck? And I've done videos on this in the past. I think I did a video, it was like, what's a nice guy like you doing in a place like this, or something like that, words to that effect. But anyway, I'll answer the question because people ask from time to time, and I think it's important. But I'm also going to share kind of a thought that I've had about hiring at trucking companies too. So in the trucking industry, you meet all sorts of people, and you meet people that have accomplished significant things in other industries. Sometimes guys are retired military, and you know, if you know anything about the military, you know usually if a guy gets to retirement, he must have done something right along the way, because they let him stay at least 20 years, right? And I guess the corollary of that is that they let him stay 20 years and they're going to be paying for him for the rest of his life, including health care. So they must have felt like the investment was worth it. Other people you meet, I know people that have been accountants, you know, all sorts of backgrounds, right? Commercial pilots, people that worked in the corporate world, people that were school teachers, people that were in the medical professions, and people that practiced law. And you know, and here's the thing, and there is a distinction here. So lots of people go to law school, but they don't necessarily practice law ever. I had some classmates, I graduated from the University of Maryland School of Law in 2002. I had some classmates that never once practiced law. They didn't even sit for the bar exam. Other people will sit for a bar exam so they can get a law license. And by the way, if you see somebody that it says John Doe, Jane Doe, Esquire, ESQ is usually abbreviation. Esquire means they are a member of the bar. They've passed a bar exam. If somebody just has JD after their name, it's kind of like having, you know, MD or MBA or something like that, PhD after their name. It doesn't mean they're necessarily licensed to do anything. Now, doctors put MD after their name, but they still have to be licensed in the state that they're practicing in. Same thing with engineers. Somebody could have a PhD in engineering, but if they're not a PE, they're not like a professional engineer, they might not be licensed for certain things. And you know, same thing with CPAs. CPA is a licensure thing. Doesn't mean you can't be an accountant, but some accountants are not certified public accountants, which has, you know, you have to have passed a CPA exam. You get it. So anyway, you know, I went to law school, and candidly, I was coming out of the military and I didn't really want to turn wrenches for a living. I had some skills that I could do that, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a white collar person. But what I soon discovered, and you know, so first of all, I came out of law school. My third year in law school was, I could tell you I was in a third year class with a federal judge when the Twin Towers were attacked in New York City, also the Pentagon and stuff. So that kind of threw the economy into a tailspin, and hiring kind of shriveled up. And while I was pretty sharp, I was in the top half of my class, I wasn't in the top 10%. I was a guy that started out at night going to school while I was still in the Navy, and I started out in the night program, which was it is a 4-year program, and I managed to catch up to the people that were finishing in 3 years. So I got all the way through law school in 3 years, which is as quick as you could do it. And I did it by taking extra classes, took summer classes, I wrote onto a law journal, I did moot court, I did everything I could to get extra, you know, get credits piled up. So anyway, I finished law school, but I have to go like guerrilla, right? I have to like make my own way, and I kind of do that, and I kind of start being entrepreneurial and kind of getting people to mentor me and stuff. But unfortunately, I ran into some people that were kind of charlatans along the way, and I found myself out practicing on my own. And long story short, I had a career in the law that was about 17 years, and I had times where I was very successful. The aforementioned working as counsel to a hedge fund, but that came to a screeching halt when the fund got closed. I had other times when I was doing very well, but I also had some famine times. And one of the things that happened that really I wouldn't have classified as a famine, but it was like slowly not getting as many calories as I would want, right? It wasn't a full-blown famine. So in 2017, my firm, and I had one partner, we lost our largest client. And despite our best efforts and really beating the bushes and really marketing, we couldn't find a client big enough to sustain our operations. And we had invested a lot in it, in technology and just software, security systems to protect files, both electronically, and we had cameras in our offices. Speaking of cameras, right? We had, and that was a requirement of our clients, right? And so, we put a lot into it, and it took a lot of energy, and we kind of had to wind things down. And fortunately, everybody pretty much, and I kind of saw it coming, so everybody pretty much landed on their feet, including me. And what I did is I took a job at a law firm that a friend of mine worked at. And it wasn't really my first choice, but again, I just, I wanted to have something to do. And I needed the money because, candidly, we had a pretty big wheel to turn. We had a big house. We had, several vehicles, including my Sprinter. And I had been toying with the idea, and I should say my firm was going through a merger with a bigger firm. And I, initially I saw that as probably a positive, but I'm always a little bit wary of mergers. And, I've talked about that in the trucking industry. But anyway, I have this job, and it doesn't pay a lot. And when I say it doesn't pay a lot, it paid like $80,000 a year, which I know is a lot to many people. It's well above what the national average wage is. And certainly I could survive on $80,000 a year if I had already downsized, which we hadn't yet done. So fast forward a little bit to 2018, June to be exact. So I've worked at this other firm for a year. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. It's not particularly stressful. I represent big banks. I've done it, hundreds and hundreds of times. I'm still wrapping some stuff up from my old firm because the law is one of those things, unlike trucking, you deliver a load, you're done, right? Like, you did your job, right? Not so with the law. It just goes on and on and on and on. In fact, Charles Dickens wrote a book called Bleak House that basically is about a case that just goes on generations, and it's sometimes you get cases that feel like that. You get, and what I cut, like in the business world, we say deal fatigue. I would say like litigation fatigue or whatever. Anyway, I go to a meeting, and I thought my job was secure. But I will say that I earned more than some of the junior people because I handled more complex litigation. And again, I wasn't making a lot of money, but I didn't have to do, I didn't have to write. I had no administrative responsibilities other than the cases I was working on. It was just Terry did his thing. So, I got my files, I'd update them, I'd go to court, I'd, win my cases, by and large. And that's what I was getting paid to do. But the bean counters at the bigger firm, as this merger got closer, they wanted to cut costs. Now, the firm had already laid some people off on the administrative support side, but I don't know whether... what I think actually happened is their preliminary numbers did not match up with what the reality was ultimately going to be. And so they were like, hey, let's get rid of this guy. He's making X amount of money. And maybe they thought, hey, he's been doing this a while, maybe he's going to quit or something. I don't know. But in any event, June 2018, I get called into my boss's office and he tells me I'm being laid off. So I had started doing the stuff in the Sprinter, like just delivering loads locally using U-Ship as my platform. And so I immediately just ramped it up and started just going across the country and delivering stuff all over. And that was fun, but it wasn't as profitable as I needed it to be, and I was carrying all the overhead. And of course I was constantly looking for loads, like anybody that works off a load board, right? I was constantly, it's a game of chess. I move this, but then I need to move this, and then I need to do this. And that's what I was constantly doing. So my wife said to me, hey, why don't you just get a CDL? And then you can drive a truck. Now, I will say that it was not my intention initially to be an OTR driver, because I went to work at Estes. And I went to work at Estes because they were going to train me and I was just going to do LTL. I would have been in LTL world. That didn't work out either. So then, I don't spend a lot of time. When I see something's going sideways, I move on, right? I'm not nostalgic. I have stayed in deals a little longer than I should have, but I don't. I've learned over time to just move on. So after 2 months there, and they were jerking me around about the CDL school, I just left, and they acted all surprised. What? And because I told my supervisor, I finished my shift. I'm like, hey, today was my last day. What? Yeah, well, stop lying to people, or at least to me. So what I want to be clear about is that I wasn't making huge money as a lawyer. Now, in years prior to that, I made significantly more. I said I was making 80. In years, 3-4 years before that, I was making 3 to 4x that amount. But all good things come to an end, right? And so I was never like the superstar, went to Harvard, went to Yale, went to Stanford. I mean, I know lots of people like that, and they make $500 a year. They also work insane hours and don't get much time off. They have really nice cars and nice houses, but they spend a lot of time trying to justify those salaries to their partners or whatever. So I don't really miss any of that. I was delivering some like chairs to somebody one time in Illinois, and this is when I was doing stuff in my Sprinter with my son. And this woman's like, oh, are you ever going to go back? Because, people say, how'd you get into this? And I tell them the story. And she said, oh, are you going to go back to practicing law? And I was like, well, so I'm wearing a t-shirt and shorts. I'm driving around the country with my son in my van delivering stuff. I said, I don't have an overarching desire to have another conference call with Bank of America. I don't miss it. And you know, so every once in a while I'll be in like the DC area or the Baltimore area, which is where I practice, although I practice in every county, every jurisdiction in Maryland. But so way out in Cumberland, way beyond Cumberland, if you know where that is, off of I-68, and then way out on the eastern shore, like Snow Hill. But I don't miss it, you know, because I'll be like driving and I'll be like, man, I used to like on Sunday nights, because I would have court almost every day, and it would be a different place all the time. And sometimes it would be one place in the morning, get in my car, eat my lunch in the car, because I finished court in one county, and then I had to be 2 counties away for afternoon court. I don't miss any of that. I don't miss getting up at, you know, 4:30 in the morning on a winter morning and getting, you know, a coat and tie, top hat, and then getting on the road at 5:15 because I know I got to fight traffic going, you know, around DC or whatever when it's crappy weather. I don't miss any of that. So I think that the moral to this story is that never confuse titles or even education with, you know, a person. I think a lot of people think that lawyers are more important or make a lot more money than truck drivers. And the truth of the matter is that, yeah, some lawyers make a lot more than truck drivers, but there's a lot of lawyers that are working for freaking chicken feed in public interest law. I mean, I used to be in court every once in a while when prosecutors would come in, and these prosecutors, I'd look at their shoes, and I'd be like, these guys can't even afford good shoes. And, you know, there's all sorts of lawyers like that. They're just toiling away in the legal trenches, and, you know, it's stressful and it's thankless a lot of times, and then they got nothing to show for it in the end, except, you know, an ulcer. So, you know, I am fortunate though, and I always have to caveat things that I do with this. I'm fortunate that I have a pension and I have really good health care. It's allowed me to do things that I probably wouldn't have done. You know, if I'd have gotten laid off and I didn't have that backstop, I would have, and, you know, and I collected unemployment and stuff, but you know, I probably would have been like, man, I got to find a job. I would have been, you know, putting my resume out everywhere on LinkedIn and all over the place. And, you know, I'm happy that I haven't had to do that. And my goal is just probably another 5.5 years. So another 5.5 years in trucking. I don't know if it's all going to be OTR. I would like to, even though I love being on the road, my you know, it's important to be home too. And you know, the company I work with has regionals. They have a few different regionals, and I told my wife after like 6 months and kind of establishing myself, I'm going to be like, hey, next time a regional route opens up, I'd like to be considered for it, and then I can run, you know, mid-Atlantic to New England and be back and forth through the house, you know, at least on weekends, but maybe even once during the middle of the week. I won't make as much, but, you know, we're slowly getting to that point where our houses are going to be paid off, both the property we rent and the house we live in, they will be paid off. You know, we'll be in a better position than we are right this second. But let me say this, you know, I've told people about how to set up LLCs and how to structure things when you're like an independent contractor at a company like Prime or Forward Air or Hirschbach, whoever, right? I collected unemployment during the 2 weeks I wasn't working. After I left Prime and before I started this job, I was collecting unemployment. And when I say collecting, we just got the check last week. That's the other thing too. If you are in a position where you get laid off, you still got to have some cash laying around to tide you over until benefits start kicking in. And by the way, the benefits are not great. They're not. If you're living in your parents' basement and your only expenses are like weed and Cheetos, unemployment's probably okay. But and I think during COVID it was a lot better. But I looked at it like found money. But you should set yourself up for that in case something happens. So anyway, I hope that answers people's questions. I don't judge people by their occupation, and neither should you. It's a terrible habit that Americans have, because in other countries, what you do for a living is not who you are. It's not something that people use to judge your worth. My wife has a friend who is a doctor in Switzerland. He's not really seen in Swiss society as any more important than the guy who picks up the trash. The doctor, my wife's friend, he had his education paid for by the government. Why? Because he had an aptitude, he had talent, he was smart. And they said, we'd like you to be a doctor and, serve in hospitals in our country, in your country. And so he did. But, I could tell you that when there's a rotting bag of trash on the curb in a big city like Geneva or Zurich or, Bern, which is the capital, by the way, of Switzerland, nobody cares whether or not they're going to be able to see an oncologist if they don't have cancer. But everybody cares is if there's a rotting bag of trash on the curb. So garbage men are just as important as doctors. And so the example I would use is when your sewer is backed up, is it really important? Who do you think is more important to you and has more status? A plumber or a lawyer? A plumber or, an investment banker? I mean, we all have something to contribute. And so if you're going through life thinking, hey, I'm just this, don't do that. The best thing you can do is be a good, if you're a man, be a good husband, be a good father, be a good friend to people. And a woman, be a good mom, be a good wife, be a good, be a friend to people. That's really what it's all about. Nobody, I've been around people when they passed away. Nobody ever said, oh, I wish I'd have made more money, or I wish I would have worked more, or I should have gotten my MBA. No one says that, right? All they care about is their family, both in the world where they are and where they think they're going. That's all they care about is family. So anyway, little philosophizing, not trying to be super religious, but none of this matters, man. It doesn't. So it's just, it's means to an end, but that's it. It's not who you are. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I appreciate all my new subscribers. I very much appreciate all my old subscribers too. So I will talk to you soon. Bye.